So, what all are we up to on our Tuscan urban farmstead today? Well, practically, today we are working on, just a second, we are working on recuperating and repurposing all of these boxes. Now, these two in particular have the writing bouton. They were gift boxes with bottles of wine. Here's the original. This was actually given as a prize number 5. As you can see, it's been written there. It's kind of cracked, and this one contained Vecchia Romagna Riserva, 4 bottles, crema cacao, elixir quina, and cherry brandy. I used to love that cherry brandy. So what I've been doing here so far, here's one thing. When you find these old boxes, you got a choice to make. You can either repurpose them completely, which is pretty much what I've been doing. Excuse me, I've just got so much going on at the same time in this very small space. It's pretty much what I've been doing with this box, because it was so... Just a second. It was so ruined when I got it that I have been... You see, the original color was this blue paper, but it was completely falling to pieces. So I actually kind of took it apart initially, glued the top and the bottom back on. As you can see there's the mark of the glue from, maybe you can't see it, there you go, the mark of the glue when I was gluing the top and the bottom back on. I covered them with the paper. And you see, people, they make a huge production out of all of these crafts. These crafts, all the crafts about scrapping and so forth, they were born, like, really to be thrifters, to be parsimonious, to not be spending a whole bunch of money in recuperating these kind of stuff. So here, I'm showing you how I work sometimes. I'm taking this really ruined silvery green paper I have, and I'm repurposing it to be recuperating the inside of this beautiful round box that I have. See, it was a beautiful round box of panettone. I have it since years. I used it to store away a lot of stuff, but it's really ruined. So this is what you do. You just, like, you just use the scraps you have to make something nice out of them, and it doesn't have to be perfect. That's the big trick we have. So practically, when you have these kind of boxes, that's your challenge. Are you going to keep it just the way it is? This was a gift box containing Vecchia Romagna Riserva. And so what are you going to do? What part are you going to be keeping? So for the two of these two boxes, I'm definitely going to be fixing up the inside some, covering that. I'm probably going to be saving the inside here. However, I am going to be covering I'm going to be covering this part with other kind of paper. I'm not so sure if I should use this kind of paper. Now, you can either buy these are prints, which I'm sure you receive in any of the magazines you buy. Prints, you can either use prints like these, or else you can use old journals and so forth to be repurposing. I am definitely going to be leaving this as it is. For now, I have already coated it with, as you see, it's very shiny. I have already coated it with one hand of flatting, boat flatting. I use normal boat flatting. It's cheap and it's fine. Kind of sticky. But still, I've done the same on this one. I've kept the inside there, and I'm going to be finishing off the work on the inside. And then these boxes, you can either gift them, or you can choose to use them around the house. Here's another project I've been working on this last month, which I haven't been setting you aside to. I've already made this a long time ago, and this is like I actually bought the prints. I still have another paper holding those prints. Just a second. Here it is. This is the original piece of paper with those exact same prints. So what did I do? I got this tray. This tray is a tray that you can like open up the legs on the bottom, painted it, glued this on there, and then did some more gold paint on there. And so this last month, this is the game I've been playing in my free time. I've picked some of those, and I've created for myself a whole nice little, breakfast boards. Now I'm probably going to be I might be gluing onto the back of these some slabs of, the black, the really black, I don't know the name right now. There's these slabs of lava kind of cutting board. I might be gluing those on the back so that this is the pretty side, but if you want to be using these to be cutting really as cutting boards, or else another thing I might do is I might cover the whole thing with glass. Cover this with glass as well. I don't know. We will see. Meanwhile, there they are, all really pretty to see and to use. I just love going and sitting outside on the porch with my little tray with everything on there. Or else you can sell it. That's the cool part of all of this kind of stuff. And so anyhow, this is what we've been up to in the urban farmstead. And here's a thing that often has left me kind of in the sticks. We always wait for the timing to be working to be perfect. If we wait for the time to be, just put that there a moment. Here's how I'll just show you briefly how you do this. You coat the whole back. You coat the whole back of your piece of paper, right, with the glue. This is diluted glue. This is diluted glue because you want your paper to get very to get really wet. Once it's really wet, then it will also kind of stretch, and that's when you can like smooth out any air bubbles that show up, which is also why you want to dilute your glue. And I don't know how you call it in English. I think it's hodgepodge, Mod Podge, I don't know. In Italy it's called vinaville. So practically, then you kind of just like smooth out any air bubbles that form underneath. It doesn't have to be perfect though, depending on where you are using it. What was I saying before? We get so hung up on waiting for the perfect moment to getting around to doing our crafts. And we totally forget that these crafts, especially if you're doing this kind of stuff, it's time to dry. So when you have an inspiration, just cut out a couple of minutes to be doing that. Then you can put it aside, throw it aside. Can put it aside for you to be, so you can concentrate on something else while it dries out. And you can keep, yes, that's how you can get a hell of a lot of stuff done. You know, sometimes we put aside, as women, we put aside specific time, you know, okay, right now I'm gonna sit down and I'm gonna do all of the sewing. When you get yourself into the mentality of you never have idle hands, you sit down and you're watching TV, fine. Have something in your hands to be doing. You can be sewing. You want to rest, but while you're resting, you're never idle. Not truly. Your hands are always doing something. Now, if you're anything like me, another thing I do a lot is I watch a lot of dramas in other languages, TV dramas on YouTube in other languages. And so that's probably a moment where I won't be able to be doing too much when I'm following along in my TV dramas, because I'm having to read the subtitles in order to understand what's going on. And then as time goes by, you start becoming acquainted with the language, or at least if you're studying it, like Chinese, it's so cool now because oftentimes I understand what's being said even though I'm not watching, because I'm also pairing up my watching of these TV dramas with actually learning the language. And so, you know, as long as everything you're doing, oftentimes people will accuse you of being lazy. Now, you don't have to be explaining them nothing. Make sure that everything you're doing, you are uniting something useful with something enjoyable. That's how you make so much progress, and you don't even realize it. That's how you can start making a lot of progress in so many different areas in your life, and you're not even realizing that you're constantly leveling up. And here's the problem. Don't go around trying to show the world how good you are, trying to tell the world what you understand, what you don't understand. That's one of the biggest problems we have nowadays. People are so keen on getting approved that they're like, everyone is out there to be proving themselves to the world how intelligent, how smart, how everything they are. Oh, come on. If you really were that intelligent and smart, you wouldn't be out there, you know, you wouldn't be out there tooting your own horn all the time, man. You've got a lot of talents. Keep them to yourself. It's so much nicer when people discover your talents than when you tell them, hey, this is what I want you to know about me. I'm so great about doing this. I'm so great with that. I'm so great with the other. Now, of course, sometimes it just comes out by accident. Like the other day I was on a call. Okay, my thing here doesn't want to cooperate. I'm like just kind of balancing my phone here. The other day I was on a live call with a bunch of other people, and I was trying to give a very short, it was a public speaking class, impromptu speech. It was just like I jumped on right at the moment. I wasn't really prepared for this. I was eating and everything else. And practically it came out kind of like accident, that because it was my turn and I was trying to, like, these 5 different languages kept popping up in my brain. Now, it doesn't mean that I'm necessarily 100% fluent in all of those languages. Well, Italian, English, German, pretty much, yes. I'd really have to be thinking, well, German not so much if I don't practice it like a whole bunch of other languages. But still, You know how it is. If you know more than one language, you're going to have these words popping up in those various languages, which is so cool when I get together with people who speak the same variety of languages as I do, because then we can just like throw in whatever random word comes along in any of those languages and everyone understands, and we just keep on talking, which is what I really that's a lot of fun actually. But anyhow, talking about all your talents and gifts and everything, you don't have to be tooting your horn too much. Although I must say, one of my big mistakes perhaps with my resume is that I've always tried to include like everything in my resume. I'm coming from a place of, with my resume, I'm coming from a place of, the more I tell you what I'm capable of, what I know how to do, what I've done, the more you should be able to understand where you can use me in your job, in your business. And apparently, nowadays especially, most people are not capable of doing that kind of mathematics in their mind. We have become so specialized and so refined on what it is we do and how we do it, that we are no longer capable of seeing the bigger picture of things. So now for sure someone's going to come along and say, Amber, there's so much dirt on the bottom of your thing here. Look at that. Ooh. Yuckomot. Yeah, well, it was stuck there before. It's not like you can wash. It's not like you can, wash out paper. You're gonna have to wait until it gets out of the way. So there's another skill most people have forgotten completely. Or rather, I understood one thing. Very often people will use it as an excuse to be bashing the people they don't like. And that is the capability of talking while keeping your hands busy with something else. Once I was paying, so I wasn't really guest, so I was a paying guest at a house of a couple of ladies, allegedly fellow believers. And I was staying at their home for 3 days. And one of them just couldn't stand me. I don't know what her problem was. And so, like, when I was talking, like these two women, I don't remember if they were from Ethiopia. No, they were not from Ethiopia. Or were they? I can't remember now. Well, they were from Africa somewhere. Anyhow. And so practically, one of them just couldn't stand me for sure. The other one was probably making nice just because, I was paying to stay in our home. And paying her to stay in our home, well, we went to do her, as we were also going to the Jehovah's Witness Assembly. And anyhow, so there I was in the kitchen preparing food and talking and chattering away merrily. I was so happy to be with fellow believers. And you could just see their eyes roll, man. It was just like, whoa. And then at one point, one of them said, "Be quiet, we are working." And just like, girl, seriously? So anyhow, I went to my room shortly after that. And then they started talking. And the thing was this, I could hear them through the wall because my room was right, the wall of my room was right there next to the, it was the wall between that room and the kitchen. So I heard every word. Talking shit about me, and they went on for like over an hour. Talk. Ooh. So pretending that you do not know, especially women, men maybe are a little bit different on this, but pretending that you need silence in order to work. Yeah, whatever. You cannot focus. Well, there's certain kinds of jobs where you work where you really need to be quiet or you cannot focus. But I'm probably talking a bunch of BS for a lot of you right now. The thing is, what we are really missing in this world is true connection. True connection oftentimes comes from making the most of the short time we have together. Oftentimes I will have people, I'll give them a lift. I'll offer to give them a lift, and they're like, oh, but we wouldn't want to bother you. I'm like, hey, I mean, we only got this lifetime. We don't know when the next time we're going to see each other is. And if I offered, you're not bothering. You know? So anyhow, I'm doing a lot of blabbering here as I'm going, as you can tell. So, yeah. Food for thought. Food for thought. As we go, some food for thought. Make the most of the moments you have with people, because you never know when the last time you're going to see them is. Some people say, ooh, I do hope it's the last time I see them. Yeah, well, you'd be really sorry. So, there we go. Now that fell over really quick. Sping, 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 sping. So anyhow, what's going on in the urban farmstead today? This is what's going on in the urban farmstead. And once I'm done with this, so actually these two, this one here, I'm really slow at getting around to doing these kind of things because sometimes I have the inspiration, probably happens to you guys too. You have an inspiration and then all of a sudden the inspiration is gone. And you knew you were going to do something with it, and then all of a sudden you get around to doing it and nothing of what you thought of is there anymore. So you kind of have to put it off. Well, this I have been I have this box since over a year now, maybe 2. Actually, I think it's 2 years now that I'm having this. I have this box, and it was from Cucirini Cantoni Coats, and maybe you can still see the outline of the anchor, CC, whatever. And I said to this friend of mine, hey, if you give it to me, I'll make it up all really nice, because here's another box I made. I've made a lot of these boxes. I just enjoy them so much. You've probably seen this one time and again in my photos and everything. This one, I just painted it all, and then I use it as my sewing thing. And so anyhow, I said to her, hey, maybe you want to give that to me, and I have an idea to make it all really nice, and so I'm finally getting around to doing it. See, I had painted it, and then I just left it there. It got covered with all these scratches. And that's another thing. Getting back to how to do this kind of business. Yeah, that's a box full of stuff that I need to be sorting out. Anyhow, getting back to the discourse of how to go about doing this kind of work, right? I started out saying, if I remember correctly, that this has become such a huge production. Like anywhere, business finds ways to be making money. So they put the prices up real high for all of the products to make it really like, ooh. Paper towel products here in Italy cost a mint, which is absolutely ridiculous. Then the fad goes by, and it's off and on. The fad goes by, and then you're back to some normalcy again. But really, they will say, for example, you have to use this or that product to make sure that they call it an aggrappante, which is a product which they sell very high price, cost a mint for a little jar like maybe this big. There you go, that big maybe. Not even smaller sometimes. You see, you need to put this on so that, you know, it doesn't get scratched. It doesn't, the whatever you put on sticks to it. Well, you can achieve that pretty well. You can achieve a hell of a lot of effects by experimenting, choosing to experiment the different products you put together. Like if you're painting, some paints will stick, some paints won't. If you start experimenting with your paints on the products, you can achieve some really cool effects. For example, you know that antique effect, which they sell these super costly products to be achieving. Well, you can achieve that exact same antique effect by using two different kinds of paint which don't really get along that well. Then, of course, once you've covered it all, once you've coated it all with maybe some flatting or something of the sort, it's not going to be so easy for that stuff to be messing itself up. And even if it does, you know, you still have your chance at, you still have a way to be. You can always be making it different, fixing it up differently. So, as we said before, idle hands are the devil's tools. And if while you are listening to your Bible reading, for example, I watch a lot of videos, or rather, I listen to a lot of videos. Getting back to uniting what is useful with what is pleasurable. For me especially, listening to whatever it is I want to be learning while I am keeping active really helps me to retain a lot of that information. If I just sit down and study it, you know, there is always it's always necessary to set apart a little bit of time for your regular kind of good old study techniques that we've been brought up with, you know, the kind where you sit down and actually do the homework, because handwriting is such a necessary part of learning as well. Jotting down your own, like, that really connects with your subconscious mind much better than a lot of other techniques, for example. However, when you keep busy as you are listening to other stuff, you are involving your entire body in that learning. that's another thing. How do men socialize? Theoretically, men socialize by, theoretically, men socialize a lot by getting to know each other while they are working. Does that mean they blabber the whole time? Well, that depends on the type of man you're dealing with. Oftentimes, they won't be blabbering that much, like us, not us women style, although men can be even worse gossips than women, I tell you. But still, it's about doing stuff together and talking while you are doing, that you can actually connect with your kids a lot as well. Take advantage of any moment you can to be building rapport with your family members, with your kids. That's one thing that I really miss about my stepdad. Actually, the more I think of it, the more I can see exactly where my style of communicating, where my style of storytelling, where my style of interacting with people comes from a lot. I mean, with him, the one thing that was always to be expected when he was around, you sat down at the table. No hanging out in the living room in front of the TV. No. Everyone, table set properly, and he made sure to teach us how to set the table properly. Early age, already when I think it was, I was in Hamburg. We were in Hamburg, and I was like between ages 5 and 7, and he was working shifts in a restaurant. And he came home and he taught us how you dry how to dry the cutlery in such a way that you don't leave any marks on the cutlery, on the flatware, on the silverware. You don't want to leave any marks on the silverware. And so he taught us exactly, like, practically at home. Our home was run pretty much the level of a hotel already, you could say. There were meals, planned meals, and everyone had their turn of the week to be cooking making the breakfast, making the lunch, making the dinner, whatever it was. And other thing was, once we were all at the dinner table, it wasn't simply keep your mouth shut and eat. Oh no. If he was there, if my stepdad was there, you could expect a long, entertaining meal in which we would talk about any and everything that was inspiring him at the moment. And he'd also be making all these parallels between one thing or another. That's one capability which nowadays most people don't have anymore. Most people are incapable of connecting the dots between different subjects. I think I was listening to, I think it's in the book of 5 Rings, I was listening to the other day, and he talks about how the way of the sword, the way of war, the way of whatever it was, he was saying, he talks about you have to study, like by studying one area of life, you should be able to study all areas of life. You should be able to make the connection between one area of life and another. One example. When my son was a toddler, I was having a really hard time getting through to him. Because, you know, he's a boy. He's born with the male genes. He doesn't speak female. He speaks male. And the same goes for you. Like, if you are born biological male, there's nothing you can do about it. Your brain is wired a certain way. Just because you are more or less capable of being more, just because you are more or less capable of empathy, compassion, and all those allegedly female emotions, does not mean that miraculously your XY chromosomes have become only, what is it, only X or only Y? I don't remember. So it's like, just, if you are born with XY, there's no way you're going to be XX, all right? Your brain is going to be wired like the brain of someone who is born with an XX brain, all right? So, where am I going with this? Back in the day, I was doing Amway here in Italy. In fact, two of my favoriteest speakers of all times, public speakers, the ones that most inspired me, and I keep reselling their things that they've said time and again. I don't always say that it was them who said it. However, these two people, their names are Massimo Bini and Enzo Capecchi. And so one thing that was going on with the Amway group I was part of was we were all signed up for what was called back then IDA School First, and then it became Network 21. Well, it merged with Network 21, and of course the name Network 21 was the main name. So practically what happened was they were giving us all of these books to be learning, to be reading, you know, because I say, everyone still says it, leaders are readers. And so one of the recommended books was Men Are From Mars and Women Are From Venus. So, I'm really making a mess here. Yeah, that would be good. Like that, yeah. And so practically, every time I tried to use those techniques with men, I failed miserably. However, here I was with this kid. He was like between the ages of 5. Excuse me. This was happening when he was between the ages. He was just like 1 year old when I started doing Amway, and so he grew up with me, listening to me, listening with me in the car, listening with me to all of the cassettes. Plus, I was practicing a lot of what I was learning on him, of how to communicate. And that was before someone decided that I had a problem, that I was somehow not right in the head. That was a big fat lie. It was only because they weren't capable of controlling me. that they diagnosed me that way, Jehovah's Witnesses. So practically what happened was it was so hard because he was always feeling so defeated. And for him it was like everything was useless. He was no good. There was no way he would ever learn and get the... I mean, it's heartbreaking when you have a little child who, because of the idiotic way of thinking and joking and everything of his mother, and other people in the family, thinks that they're not good enough. Okay? And so I thought to myself, wait a minute, he's a boy. So if I start talking to him the way John Gray says to talk to men, and sure enough, he started becoming sure of himself. I changed my way of communicating with my kid. I started talking to him Martian instead of Venusian. I made that conscious effort to be encouraging and patient and use Martian instead of Venusian. And sure enough, he started becoming sure of himself. He started becoming a leader at school. He started stepping in to protect the weak, although he got his head smashed in for having done that. And I mean, when that happened, I think he was 8 and he was protecting the guy the kid that was 7 from the boys from the boys who were 10 or something of the sort. The bullies at school. So, I mean, he started becoming sure of himself. Not that his life was easy, because, I mean, they made sure to make life living hell for me. So, of course, that will reflect on how your like the way your family members. This is something for all you who have narcissistic parents and narcissistic siblings. Do not fall for the trap of, oh, but it's their family. Because, I'm sorry, toxic, I didn't know it back in the day, but those toxic people will literally ruin your child's life. Do everything they can to turn your child against you. And then they will go, they will be as vicious and mean as to tell your child that it is your fault, that your child is missing out on so many things, which they are the reason you cannot allow for your child to, you cannot make time or space or money for your child for having that kind of stuff. My family took advantage of me economically like crazy. My family took advantage of me in so many ways. I was always saving them. And when I was in need, not one of them was helping me. They were all like, ooh, Amber, how are you going to manage now? And my youngest sister, my youngest sister went as far as to threaten me to have social services take my child away from me, which is the reason why I ended up accepting the offer to marry me of that creep who then turned out to be a pedophile. I accepted there was something that was so wrong about this guy and I couldn't put my finger on it, but he offered to marry me. And I was like, okay, if I can give my son a house and everything, I'll keep my son safe from social services. I'll keep my son with me. And because my sister had called up that night and threatened me, Like, it was like I had already landed a job at Four Seasons Florence. I was already going to go work there. What happens? She chooses to call me in the middle of the night, and she's done this more than once. And call me in the middle of the night. Initially, "Oh, Amber, how are you?" And then slowly work her way into this kind of robotic way of talking, in which she's like threatening me, but keeping a really steady, calm voice while I start freaking out. It doesn't work anymore. It used to, though. So, I mean, I don't know if she's definitely involved with Satanism or God knows what else, because, yeah, I mean, she told me. And here's the thing. She vomited after me a lot of confessions about being involved in Satanism and doing these kind of things. And here's the thing. Anyone can come and say, "But that's not true." Well, her mouth testified against herself. She can talk about God as much as she wants, and I'm always going to be, "Yeah, which God? Which God are you talking about?" Because, you know, Satan is the god of the evildoers. And people can get all offended at me for saying this. I'm like, sorry, people, she is the one who said all of these horrible things to me. Her mouth testified against herself. So that's... Okay, Bible story time. Bible story time, because it's so important you get this. Once upon a time, King Saul and his sons were caught up in this battle against the Philistines. And were surrounded, and I mean, it was fulfillment of prophecy. They got surrounded, and yeah, they got killed. So next morning, this one guy finds the dead body of the King Saul and of his shield bearer, or whatever the guy was. And so he thinks, "Ooh, this is a chance for me to get rich." So, because everyone knew that Saul hated David and wanted to kill him, what people did not know was that David was not led by the reasoning of human beings, but was led by the reasoning of his God. King David more than once had had a chance to kill Saul. Yet, even when his own men said, "Hey, Saul is here, should we kill him for you?" And David's like, "How dare you even think of raising your hand against the anointed..." Oh, sorry. "How dare you even think of raising your hand against the anointed of Jehovah? No way will I allow for any of you to kill King Saul, neither will I take this chance to be killing him, because God anointed him as king, and it is not my place to take him down. God also anointed me, but my place is to wait patiently." So anyhow, here we are. Saul is dead. Jonathan is dead. All of Saul's sons have died in that last battle. Well, not all of them, but almost all of them. And so this guy thinks, "Ooh, this is a chance for me to make myself a name with David. So if I can just tell David that I killed King Saul, he's going to reward me so much." And so he chooses to go over to find David and tell him this lie, this big fat lie that he had killed Saul. So he goes to David and he says, "David, your enemy has died. Your enemy is dead." And the Philistines had surrounded him, and he asked me to kill him, and so I reluctantly obeyed and I killed him. And so King David is so distraught. He rips his garments and he proclaims a mourning, and he says nobody these days should drink or eat because the mighty men of Israel have been killed. King Saul and Jonathan, which by the way was his best friend, Jonathan was, even though, like, Jonathan was a really humble guy. Jonathan was allegedly the heir to the throne, and yet Jonathan himself said to David, "You will be king of Israel, and I will be your right man, your right-hand man." That was not part of the plan on God's side, but, you know, he was willing to give up the throne to David because he knew that David was a man according to God's heart. So then David calls this guy, says, "Tell me the story again." He says, "Well, okay, practically, there I was with King Saul, and we were on top of the mountain, and he saw that he was completely surrounded, and so he said, 'Do not allow for the Philistines to catch me alive, kill me.' And so I drew my sword and I killed him." And he's there waiting for his reward, and David says to him, "How did you dare kill the anointed of Jehovah? Your own mouth has testified against yourself. You confessed to this. So you are guilty because you said that you did it. And no one can save you now." And so he had the people kill him. So, same thing goes for my dear little sister. She calls me up more than once telling me a bunch of horrible, nasty, nasty things. And telling me how she does all of these various things. She has testified against herself. Her own voice has testified. Her own mouth has testified against herself. She said these horrible things against me. She didn't even want to. It was almost like she was compelled to. It was a crazy situation that day. Man, I was like in shock. Because, I mean, obviously she hates my guts. She would never tell me all of her secret powers and anything, right? And there she is vomiting all of these stories, like, over the phone. I had called up offering to be there for her. She was going to have this really dangerous, apparently, well, anyhow, a surgery is always dangerous, period, on her spine. And I was like, oh, what the hell. She was not there for me. She never once showed up when I was in trouble. Actually, she made life living hell for me when I was in trouble. But here I was, it was like 2 years later, and I'm like, oh, what the hell. Just put it behind you. So I call her up and I say, "Hey, listen, I know that you're going to be having the surgery, so if you need anything." She's like, "I would rather die than have any help from you ever." And she starts vomiting all her slew of ideas of things, of how she controls energy, how she implants in the minds of others her thoughts and controls them from far away and everything. And I was just like, whoa, this is witchcraft. But anyhow, where was I going with this whole thing? I remember where I was going with this whole thing. But anyhow, yeah, story time. It's a lot of story time. Oh yeah, because we were talking about being able to connect the dots between one thing and another. And then we moved on to talk about why I ended up almost marrying a pedophile. Because someone who was supposed to be on my side, had threatened to have my son taken away from me, instead of being a darling family member and helping out when I was too low. Anywho, now of course none of this is going to be going on to YouTube, I don't think. We will see. This is just my, for now, completely private Facebook Live in which I am doing some work. And we shall see what shall be in the future. There we go. So I think that's all for now. You see? You see how it's coming along? Now, isn't that pretty? All right, ciao for now.